Hi, this is the gardening guys, Owen and Conway. My name is Conway. Today's topic is going to be on peonies. Peonies are basically symbolic of spring as a plant that is highly cherished, especially in ancient history, going way back in China. For people of great wealth and nobility, they will usually grow peonies. And peonies themselves also can be very long-lived in the gardens. Generally speaking, your peonies usually requires full sun. I would probably say at least morning sun with some sort of shading in the afternoon from the extreme heat, so at least your flowers will last a little bit more longer. Peonies themselves right now, in the past, have usually come in two particular forms. One of them, of course, that we think of is our herbaceous peonies, which is a peony that basically grows up, flowers, stays green during the summertime, and then basically dies down completely to the ground at the end of the season, which of course you just cut right back. On the other hand, we have the woody peonies, which are very woody. As they get older, they get more woodier than that. Your height on these ones actually can grow anywhere from 2 to 6 feet right now, and the flowers are usually quite very large and impressive. So recently, going way back in approximately 1948, there was a Japanese hobbyist, I guess, who was basically trying to figure out how to sort of cross a tree peony with a herbaceous peony. And he ended up creating what they call an Ito hybrid. And this is what we have in here right now as an example of Ito hybrid. And what makes so different about this particular one? It has qualities of both particular parents. In one way, it has those big, humongous flowers, which can be as big as upwards of even 10 inches or so. It has leaves that basically are resembling much like a tree peony, but it also keeps its foliage quite well during the summer months. It doesn't get very tired and it doesn't get as much disease, but at the same time, it also goes to sleep on where it basically just dies down to the ground. So it would basically be cut back like herbaceous peonies. Some of the things when you look at when you're trying to grow peonies is you try to make sure that, especially when you're growing a lot of your herbaceous peonies right now, do not plant them too deep. Because especially if you plant a lot of your herbaceous peonies right now, they can easily prevent them from not flowering that well. Good draining soil is very definitely important right now when you're growing peonies here, especially here on the coast and where we are in the lower mainland of BC. In terms of fertilizing, you're looking for a fertilizer that's a little bit lower in your nitrogen. And that is your first number on the left-hand side when you look at your fertilizer right now. It should be applied at least once in the spring, and then another one after they finish blooming. And then you would also apply what's been suggested, a sort of a fertilizer in the fall to sort of help with the bud development, because they actually start waking up in the fall and developing your buds. Peonies can be known, especially on the herbaceous ones, to develop a real bad case of what they call mold. It's a type of peony mold right now, which is usually flares up when we get moist weather, and it usually will occur when the plants are not getting enough air circulation and we get a really moist spring. There isn't much that you can actually use in terms of spraying, other than praying that the rain is not that prolonged, and we try to increase your air circulation. But make sure, if you're trying to prevent that particular disease, make sure you try to cut off a lot of that foliage, because it will affect your flower buds. In some cases, your flower buds may not open up, and it should actually be disposed of and not put in your compost. So is there any questions regarding about peonies?
I think the most common asked question is, how do I keep the flower up because it's so heavy and it keep on bending down?
So in terms of keeping flower up, and that's where the Ito hybrid comes in really well, because this particular one does not require any particular support. I should mention that this particular one only grows, the Ito hybrids, roughly about 3 feet by 3 feet, usually more wider than it is taller, and it doesn't require support than you would normally get with some of these herbaceous peonies. Some of the herbaceous peonies can get quite big with a lot of petals in it right now, and those particular ones right now, if you don't stake them, they will basically droop over if we get a lot of rain. Okay, so to summarize, basically what we're looking at right now, traditionally we used to have the tree peonies, which usually have very large flowers. They could easily be upwards of 10 to 12 inches in diameter. They also tend to be more woodier as a structure over time. So tree peonies actually over time get really better with age. You may also notice that it does have a graft at the very bottom. And because it is grafted, it's been suggested that you should actually plant these a little bit more deeper, so that the top portion will actually start to root into the ground, so you get a more better plant over time. On the other hand, our traditional peonies, which are sort of herbaceous, are usually coming from a woody root system. Okay, these particular ones right now usually tend to be a little bit more shorter. They could be anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 feet in sort of height. Flowers will also vary anywhere from 2 upwards of 10 inches in diameter and somewhat perfumed. They also tend to be more susceptible to in terms of diseases. Also, with the larger blooms on some of these herbaceous peonies right now, if they can get quite heavy, so they will require staking. And also, when you're planting, because of the root system right now, they cannot be planted too deep, because if you plant these extremely deep, you find that all it does is just grow without flowering. So when they came in with the Ito hybrids back in the 70s, by a gentleman who actually was doing breeding work back in 1948, they produced this offshoot, which is the Ito hybrid. And the Ito hybrids by nature are more stockier plants. They get 3 feet by 3 feet. They will actually produce good sized flowers, much like their tree peony cousins, but the flowers, the plant themselves will actually be repeating. So when the herbaceous peonies are sort of finishing off, the Ito hybrids will start flowering. The foliage will actually stand up a lot more better, especially to disease, and does not require any sort of staking. And you will also notice with Ito hybrids right now, it also gets better with age. That's why, because they're somewhat limited in supply in the marketplace, the prices on the Ito hybrids traditionally tend to be more expensive than your traditional peonies or even your tree peonies.
What about the root system for the Ito?
Okay, so the root system on the Ito hybrid will basically be following the similar cousins of the tree peonies, which is sort of tuberous.
Is it grafted?
It is not grafted as your tree peony is. Tree peonies are mostly grafted right now, but you just suggest that you do plant them more deeper.
Sounds
At
good.
least upwards to maybe 6 inches deep to sort of get the top portion to establish yourself into the ground. So your tree peonies tend to be more slower growing. Your herbaceous ones in here right now tend to be somewhat sort of moderate, but especially with your tree peonies, because they do come from root system, because they are very, very long-lived plants. They can live many, many, many years in the garden right now for it. If you have to sort of dig them out, you should actually dig them out where you have a good size, what we call eyes. So each of these, which is now developed a spot, used to represent an eye, which is at the very base. The bigger the clump, the better. Some of these tree herbaceous peonies may take upwards of 2 years or so just to settle down in the garden to actually produce flowers for you. So that's what the Ito hybrids is taking some of both parents in terms of the flower size, as opposed to the root system, which is what the Ito hybrid has, which is a tuber system.
Sounds good.